Pavlov VR. It's a game that has had many changes over the years, and the idea of Pavlov was actually inspired by a game that is nothing like Pavlov. Dave Ville's first game was a game named Excavalypse. And in this game, you would try to survive hordes of zombies inside of a construction vehicle. So Dave got the project greenlit on Steam, and he released his first game, Excavalypse. Met with mixed reviews, you can say that the game wasn't exactly what Dave Ville's was expecting. But there's nothing else too interesting about this game other than where the idea of Pavlov initially came from. So Dave was working on a brand new update for Excavalypse. And believe it or not, this update was going to include guns in the game of Excavalypse. So I guess you could call this the first gameplay of Pavlov ever released. But Dave was infatuated with the idea of shooting guns in VR. So he decided to scrap the project in Excavalypse and make an entire new game about this mechanic alone. And this game was called VR Shooter. I know, not exactly an original title, but we'll get to that later. So Dave began testing the early mechanics of his game. Initially, he wanted to have full arms in the game of Pavlov, but this was scrapped late in development. Also in this first gameplay of Pavlov, you can actually see that the bots are taking cover. But sadly, this was another scrap mechanic during the development of VR Shooter. And in the next gameplay that we get of VR Shooter, you can actually see that the game was meant to have an out-of-body movement system. Now personally, I'm happy that this was changed during development, because this type of movement system would have absolutely destroyed the flow of Pavlov. You would have basically not been able to shoot while moving, and that's just something we don't want. In the next gameplay video we get of VR Shooter, you can see that Dave is messing with the bots and getting them ready to have gunfights. Which makes me think, was this game intended to be like a single player shooter only? I'm not sure that early in development Dave was thinking this was going to be a huge multiplayer game. And it's quite funny because these bots are very similar to the ones we have today. They're not very well developed. But in these next couple of videos we get to see the foundation of what Pavlov would eventually become. As you can see here, Dave added a blood splatter effect whenever an enemy would get shot, and then Dave would go on to add a sniper rifle to the game, and it would already have a scope on it, so it shows that scopes were working pretty early in development. But you can also see how clunky the movement system was for the game at the time. He just ended up spamming the button and moving forward, and it just looked really weird and clunky and not very finished. But what else you can see in this video is that he's starting to develop a map, and this map would go on to be Data Center. Also, the player models were different as well. I don't know where he got these models from, but they don't look anything like the models we have today. They look more like mercenaries than they do actual soldiers. And once again, we get to see just how bad the movement system was, and I think Dave realized this as well, because in the next video he adds locomotion to the game and completely scraps the out-of-body movement system, probably the best decision he's ever made developing Pavlov. He then would go on to add a shotgun to the game, and you get to see how clunky the arms are because they're clipping through the shotgun while he's trying to shoot it, which is probably why he removed the arms later on. Then he would go on to create the scoreboard and the menu for Pavlov, and it is still known as VR Shooter at this point, but as you can see in the menu it says Pavlov, so it was Pavlov VR Shooter. He then added multiplayer to the game and did a test in the next video, and this was the first official multiplayer match Pavlov ever had. This was history right here. But the game was far from finished. Everybody was still holding weapons with one hand, and the player models just looked really off, and the map was still not complete. But in just 11 days, Dave finished the map and released the No BS trailer. But really the only thing that's different here is basically just a map. He would then go on to add manual reloading to the game, so the reloading animations looked far better now. And then he would finally add the two-hand mechanic. Probably one of the best things he added to the game in my opinion. So now you can finally hold a weapon with two hands. And at this point the game was really starting to come together. He then added the player models we still have to this day and added armor, so we could basically buy helmets and armor. And then after this, the game was pretty much finished. Basically all he had to do now was just add more weapon variety. So he added the hand cannon, or otherwise known as the deagle, and then he added the 1911 as well, and then he would go on to release the MP5 and most of the other weapons that we know and love to use today. And sadly, this is the end of Dave Ville's solo development. Now I'm just assuming he developed the game solo, but realistically he might have had a few people help, but he was the main developer behind Pavlov, or VR Shooter. But after he finished development, Dave would go on to create a company named Bankrupt Games, where he would get more help from other developers in developing Pavlov. And this is where the game was first released on Steam. Pavlov VR was released on February 27th, 2017. Now this is where it becomes hard to pin down what was added in each update, because the older versions of Pavlov are no longer available to the public. Most of the time they just add a lot of bug fixes, but I'm just going to be going over what was added into the game. Update 13 is the first big update Pavlov VR received. In this update, players received new weapons and smoke and flash grenades. In Update 14 they added a vote system and a mute system into the game. Thank God they did that, that so I can mute all the squeakers. But they also added a new handgun and the sawed-off shotgun. In update 15, they pretty much just added the defuse kit or the wire cutters and the ability to kick other players from your lobby and also add a passcode. The next big update was update 16, where they added the LMG and the semi-auto shotgun, and they also added the hunting rifle. But they also added a main menu to the game that is far different from the main menu we have today. You could actually move around and interact with guns and objects in this main menu. But the most controversial thing about this update was the confirmation of a battle royale mode coming to Pavlov. Keep in mind, this is 2017, and they confirmed a battle royale mode would be in Pavlov by 2018. Guys, I don't know if you know this, but it's 2022, and we still don't have a battle royale mode in the game. So I'm kind of wondering, where did it go? In update 17, basically the only thing that was added was quick slots, which is just the ability to carry more weapons, and also some other quality of life improvements such as auto sprint. In update 18, they added gun game as a game mode, and also new weapons such as the auto shotgun, the revolver, and a bullpup rifle. They also added just regular deathmatch as a game mode as well. Update 19 was really interesting. They added the ability to suicide by shooting yourself in the head, which is funny in my opinion because it took a whole update to add the ability to suicide. But they also added the kill feed as well. Now update 20 was a fat update. They upgraded the engine of Pavlov. They added the ability to add attachments to weapons. They added the shooting range and also the ability to create community servers. They added new weapon models and also a tactical AK. Pavlov at this point was getting very close to the version we know and love today. Now the next update, which was update 21, didn't have much, but it had one thing we all love. It added gore into the game of Pavlov, which completely changed the feeling of Pavlov entirely. And they also added the 50 cal, the FAMAS, the Berettas, and the Tech 9. This update was huge for Pavlov. The next important update, which was update 23, added better modding tools into the game and also added the ability to take off and put on attachments in real time. Now the next update, which was update 24, would come out half a year later and was, quote, the biggest update they had ever released for Pavlov. And this was the World War II update. In this update, they added 3 different factions, the Axis, Allied, and Soviet soldiers, along with these factions having their own weapons. They also reworked some of the maps and added 3 brand new maps into the game: Santorini, Station, and Stalingrad. And to top it all off, they added a brand new game mode, Tank TDM, which was just a team deathmatch but with the ability to drive tanks. This update was huge for Pavlov and brought a bunch of new players into the game. Update 25, or known as the TTT update, was a fairly small update compared to update 24, but it did add TTT as an official game mode in Pavlov, and it also added a brand new mode, One in the Chamber, which still has its fans even to this day. And they also put in flashlight and laser attachments, as well as a new M4 model and a new sawed-off shotgun model. Update 26, or also known as the Industry update, added the brand new map Industry, and also added a few small things such as new Russian and NATO character models and remastered gun sounds. Overall, it was a small update compared to the last few, but it still brought some brand new content to Pavlov. And finally, update 28, the Push update. So far, this is the newest update that we have received. This update added a brand new World War II game mode called Push, which is basically just a large-scale version of World War II TDM. They also added a brand new Tiger tank to the game, and also a brand new map, Bunker. And so far guys, that's the latest update that Pavlov is on. Hopefully we will get some brand new content soon, but until then, that's the newest version of Pavlov. But if you made it this far in the video, go ahead and check that like button.